His fist connected with her jaw before anyone in the bar could process what was happening. The crack echoed like a gunshot through sudden silence. Thalia Brennan hit the floor hard, her long dark hair fanning across the dirty wooden planks. Blood bloomed at the corner of her mouth, bright red against pale skin. Staff Sergeant Derek Holloway stood over her, chest heaving, knuckles white. Behind him, 3 Rangers laughed with phones raised, recording. What none of them knew, what nobody in that cramped dive bar understood, was that the young woman bleeding on the floor had single-handedly eliminated an entire terrorist cell in Yemen 6 months ago. The woman they'd just struck could have killed all 4 of them before their phones hit the ground. But she didn't move. She just started counting. 1. The rusty compass smelled like spilled beer and broken promises. It always had. The kind of place where men who'd seen too much came to forget, or at least to sit with others who understood the weight of what they carried. Tally Brennan had been sitting in the corner booth for 2 hours, nursing a ginger ale that went flat 40 minutes ago. She kept it anyway. Having a drink in your hand meant people left you alone. Her fingers traced the worn spine of the paperback in front of her. Gates of Fire by Stephen Pressfield. Page 203, the same page she'd been stuck on for 3 weeks. Every time she tried to read, her mind dragged her back to dark corridors and the sound of her teammates' last breath. 4 months. It had been 4 months since Yemen, and she still couldn't close her eyes without seeing Dante Williams' face. The olive green t-shirt she wore fit tight against her frame. Her father's dog tags hung hidden beneath the fabric, cold metal against her heart. The military cargo pants had seen better days, but they were comfortable, familiar, safe. Her long, dark hair hung loose past her shoulders. No regulation bun tonight. Nothing that screamed military. Nothing that invited attention. Tally had learned a long time ago that the best operators were the ones nobody looked at twice. Behind the bar, Mac Henderson polished the same glass he'd been working on for 15 minutes. 68 years old, Marine Corps veteran, Operation Desert Storm. He'd watched Tally come in here every Friday for 6 months, always alone, always with that book she never seemed to finish. He recognized the look in her eyes, the 1,000-yard stare that said she'd seen things that don't fade when you close your eyes at night. The girl was carrying weight she couldn't put down. Mac heard them before the door swung open. Loud voices. The particular brand of confidence that came from men who'd never really been tested, not in the ways that mattered. Staff Sergeant Derek Holloway walked in first. 6'3", built like a linebacker, jaw like carved granite. 42 years old with 4 deployments to Afghanistan under his belt and enough medals to make generals jealous. He moved through the world like it owed him space. Up until now, the world had mostly obliged. Behind him came Specialist Garrett Webb, 24, still young enough to think that following Holloway made him untouchable. Then Corporal Jensen and Sergeant Briggs, both cut from the same cloth. Hard men who'd done hard things but had never learned the difference between strength and cruelty. Victory tastes like bottom-shelf whiskey, gentlemen. Holloway's voice carried across the entire bar. He dropped onto a stool hard enough to make it creak. 4 rounds, Mac. We just crushed the joint readiness assessment. Perfect scores. Made those Navy boys look like children playing soldier. Mac set down his glass slowly. His voice came flat, neutral. 1 round, then water. Holloway laughed. Not real laughter. The kind that came with power. With the certainty that nobody was going to tell him no. Come on, old man. We're celebrating. America's finest just proved why we're the finest. Mac didn't argue. He poured 4 shots and set them down without comment. Some fights you couldn't win by engaging. It was Jensen who spotted Tally first. He nudged Webb with his elbow, nodding toward the corner booth. Check out the bookworm. Holloway followed his gaze. His eyes narrowed when he noticed the military-style cargo pants. The way she sat with her back to the wall. The unconscious alertness in her posture. Probably some admin assistant, Briggs muttered. Paper soldier, typing up reports while real operators do real work. Webb leaned forward, voice dropping to a stage whisper that carried across half the bar. I heard there's some chick playing SEAL around here. Bet that's her. Diversity hire. checking boxes so the Navy can pretend it's progressive. Mac's hands stopped over the glass rack. Just for half a second. Long enough to say he'd heard, he knew, and he was watching. Holloway took a long pull of his whiskey. His eyes never left Tally. So she's not just a fake warrior. She's a quota hire. He raised his voice louder. Hey, sweetheart, that ginger ale looks tired. Want a real drink? We got bottles older than your service record. Tally didn't look up. She turned the page with the same deliberate calm she'd used to field strip her rifle in Yemen. Precise, controlled, giving away nothing. That annoyed Holloway more than anything she could have said. He stood, grabbed his glass, and walked toward her table. The other three followed like wolves trailing their alpha. I'm talking to you. Holloway stopped at the edge of her booth. You deaf or just rude? Tally kept her eyes on the page. Neither, just not interested. Not interested? He laughed, looking back at his crew. She's not interested, boys. You hear that? Jensen and Briggs chuckled on cue. Webb stayed quiet, watching Tally's hands. Something about the way they rested on the table bothered him. Too still, too controlled. You know what I think? Holloway leaned down, close enough that Tally could smell the whiskey on his breath. I think you're one of those affirmative action SEALs. Got handed a trident because some admiral wanted good PR. Never earned a damn thing in your life. Tally's jaw tightened, just slightly, just enough. Walk away, she said quietly, while you still can. Holloway's smile vanished. What did you say to me? I said walk away. Tally finally looked up. Her eyes met his. And for just a moment, Holloway felt something cold slide down his spine, something that whispered he was making a terrible mistake. He ignored it. You threatening me? He straightened up, puffing out his chest. You know who I am? I'm Staff Sergeant Derek Holloway. 4 combat tours, Silver Star. I've killed more enemies than you've ever seen, sweetheart. Tally closed her book. Not hard, not loud, just final. I know exactly who you are. You're a bully with a uniform. You think your medals mean you're a warrior. They don't. They mean you survived. That's not the same thing. The bar went quiet. Mac reached under the counter, fingers brushing the baseball bat he kept for emergencies. Holloway's face flushed red. Say that again? Walk away. He grabbed her book and threw it across the room. It hit the far wall and crumpled to the floor. Tally watched it fall. Her eyes tracked the trajectory with the same precision she'd used to track targets through a rifle scope. She didn't move. That belonged to someone who died for this country, she said, her voice dropping to something that barely qualified as a whisper. Pick it up. Make me. What happened next took less than 3 seconds. Holloway's fist came fast, a sucker punch aimed at her jaw. Tally saw it coming from the moment his shoulder dropped. She could have dodged, could have blocked, could have broken his arm in 2 places before his knuckles got within 6 inches of her face. She didn't. She took the hit. The impact snapped her head sideways. Pain exploded through her skull, bright and sharp and familiar. She let herself fall, let her body hit the floor with convincing force. Her hair spread across the dirty wood, blood welled at the corner of her mouth, and she started counting. 1. Holloway stood over her, chest heaving. That's what happens when you disrespect a real soldier. 2. Jensen and Briggs erupted in laughter. Webb had his phone out, but his hands were shaking. 3. Tally cataloged everything. The angle of Holloway's stance, the positions of his 3 companions, the number of witnesses in the bar, 17 civilians plus Mac, the red recording light on Webb's phone. 4. Not so tough now, are you? Holloway crouched down, grabbing a fistful of her hair, forcing her to look at him. You want to know what real pain feels like? I can show you. I've shown plenty of women who forgot their place. 5. From the shadows in the far corner, someone shifted. An old man, late 60s, sitting alone with a glass of water and eyes that had seen everything. Colonel Victor Aldridge, retired Delta Force, watched the scene unfold with an expression that gave away nothing. But his hands had moved under the table, and they were steady. 6. Tally's eyes flicked to him just for a moment. A recognition passed between them, silent and complete. She gave the barest shake of her head. Not yet. 7. Nothing to say now? Holloway released her hair, letting her head drop back to the floor. That's what I thought. All you diversity hires are the same. Talk big until someone puts you in your place. 8. Tally pushed herself up slowly. Blood dripped from her split lip onto her olive green shirt. She didn't wipe it away. Are you done? She asked. Holloway's smile faltered. There was something wrong with this picture. The woman should be crying, screaming, running away. Instead, she was looking at him like he was a math problem she'd already solved. What the hell is wrong with you? Nothing. Tally stood, movements careful and controlled. I just wanted to make sure you were finished. Finished? He laughed, but it sounded hollow now. I haven't even started, sweetheart. Yes, Tally said, picking up her bag from the booth. You have. She walked past him, past his stunned crew, past the silent witnesses who just watched an assault and done nothing. She paused at the door, turning back. My name is Lieutenant Thalia Brennan, United States Navy, service number 847-296-671. I'll be filing a formal complaint with your commanding officer by 0800 tomorrow morning. She looked at Webb. I hope your video has good audio quality. The JAG office will want to hear everything. Then she pushed through the door and disappeared into the night. Holloway stared at the empty doorway, his victory turning to ash in his mouth. Did she just... Doesn't matter. Jensen clapped him on the shoulder. It's her word against ours. 4 witnesses who will say she started it. Right, boys? Briggs nodded immediately. She threw the first punch. We all saw it. Webb said nothing. His phone felt like it was burning a hole in his pocket. Right, Webb? Holloway's voice carried an edge now. You saw what happened. She attacked me. I defended myself. Webb swallowed hard. Yeah, she attacked you. Good. Holloway's confidence returned. She's nobody. Some affirmative action quota hire who thinks a trident makes her special. I've got 4 combat tours and a silver star. Who do you think they're going to believe? But even as he said it, something nagged at the back of his mind. The way she'd looked at him. The way she'd taken the punch without flinching. The way she'd stood up like the hit meant nothing. Like she'd been hit before. Many times. By people much more dangerous than him. Like she'd wanted him to hit her. Mac appeared at his elbow, holding a rag and a bottle of water. You might want to clean that up before you go, Sergeant. Holloway looked down. Blood on his knuckles. Her blood. The hell happened to your "the customer is always right" policy, old man? Mac's expression didn't change. That young woman has been coming here for 6 months. Never caused trouble, never raised her voice, never so much as looked at anyone wrong. He paused. In my experience, the quiet ones are the most dangerous. Not because they can't fight. They're quiet because they're waiting. Waiting for what? Mac shrugged and walked away. Guess you'll find out. Outside, Tally walked 3 blocks before she let herself stop. She ducked into an alley, pressed her back against cold brick, and finally let the mask slip. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, not from pain, from the effort of holding herself back. She could have killed him, could have disabled all 4 of them before they knew what was happening. The training was there, hardwired into her nervous system, through months of the most brutal program the United States military had ever designed. But that would have meant prison, court-martial, everything she'd worked for destroyed in 3 seconds of satisfying violence. This way was better, slower, but better. She pulled out her phone and started documenting. Photos of her split lip, her swelling jaw, timestamps, location data. She recorded a voice memo describing exactly what happened, word for word, while the memory was still fresh. Then she made a call. Colonel Aldridge. It's Brennan. A gruff voice answered. I saw. You took that hit on purpose. I needed evidence. You needed a reason not to tear him apart. A pause. Smart. Risky, but smart. Tally touched her jaw, wincing. He's done this before. I can feel it. The way he talked, the way he moved. This wasn't his first time hitting a woman in that bar. No, Aldridge agreed. It wasn't. You know something. I know a lot of things, Lieutenant. Question is whether you're ready to hear them. Tally closed her eyes. The taste of blood in her mouth mixed with the memory of another taste. Salt water and copper. The flavor of Yemen. I'm ready. Not over the phone. Meet me tomorrow, 0600, the old pier near where your daddy used to fish. The mention of her father hit her like a second punch. How do you know about... I know everything about you, Talia Brennan. I've known since before you were born. Aldridge's voice softened. Your father was the best operator I ever trained. What happened to him was wrong, and it's connected to what happened tonight. Connected how? Tomorrow. 0600. And Tally? Yeah? Put ice on that jaw. You're gonna need that face for the cameras. The line went dead. Tally stared at her phone, blood drying on her lip, mind racing with questions she couldn't answer. Her father, Master Chief Connor Brennan, dishonorably discharged in 2010 for crimes he swore he didn't commit. He died in military prison in 2013, maintaining his innocence to the last breath. Tally had spent her entire career trying to rebuild the family name he destroyed, trying to prove that Brennan blood wasn't tainted. And now some stranger was telling her it was all connected. She pushed off the wall and started walking. She had ice to find, evidence to preserve, and a lot of questions that needed answers. But first, she had a promise to keep. She'd told Holloway she'd file a complaint by 0800. She intended to be early. The next morning, Tally sat in the waiting room of the Naval Criminal Investigative Service office at 0530. Her jaw had swollen overnight, purpling into an ugly bruise that no amount of makeup could hide. She didn't try to hide it. Special Agent Diana Torres emerged from an office at 0545, coffee in hand, and stopped dead when she saw Tally. Jesus, what happened to you? I need to file an assault complaint. Torres set down her coffee. Come in. Now. The interview took 2 hours. Tally walked through every detail, every word, every moment. She provided photos, timestamps, the bar's address. She gave names. Torres listened without interruption, taking notes in a careful hand. You're telling me you didn't fight back? I didn't need to. Most people would have. Most people would have at least tried to defend themselves. Tally met her eyes. I'm not most people, Agent Torres, and I knew that fighting back would give him exactly what he wanted, a way to claim self-defense. This way, it's unambiguous. He threw the first punch. He threw the only punch. Everything else is evidence. Torres leaned back in her chair, studying Tally with new respect. You planned this. I recognized the situation for what it was, and I responded accordingly. That's some cold calculation, Lieutenant. No. Tally touched her swollen jaw. That's survival. Some of us learn early that the system doesn't protect women like me. We have to protect ourselves. And sometimes that means being smart instead of being strong. Torres nodded slowly. I'll need that video. The one the witnesses were recording. Specialist Garrett Webb. He's part of Holloway's unit. He had his phone out the entire time. You think he'll cooperate? Tally thought about the look on Webb's face, the hesitation, the way his hands had shaken. I think he's not like the others. He followed Holloway because he didn't know he had a choice. Give him a choice, and he might surprise you. That's a lot of faith in a stranger. No. Tally stood, gathering her things. That's experience. I've seen good people do bad things because they didn't see another way. Webb isn't evil. He's weak. Weakness can be fixed. Evil can't. Tally left the NCIS office at 0800 exactly, the same time she'd promised Holloway she'd file. She liked keeping her promises. It was one of the few things about herself she still recognized. The drive to the old pier took 20 minutes. She hadn't been there since she was 12 years old, sitting beside her father while he cast his line into water that never gave up its fish. Fishing isn't about catching fish, he'd told her once. It's about waiting, learning to be still, learning that sometimes the best thing you can do is nothing at all. She'd asked him how you knew when to do something. He'd smiled, that warm smile she still saw in her dreams. You count. You count until you know, and then you act. Tally parked and walked to the end of the pier, where a figure was already waiting. Colonel Victor Aldridge looked older in daylight. The lines on his face were deeper, the gray in his hair more pronounced, but his eyes were the same as they'd been the night before. Sharp, watchful, missing nothing. You look like hell, Lieutenant. Thanks. You look like you've been waiting a while. I've been waiting 12 years. He gestured to the bench beside him. Sit. We have a lot to discuss. Tally sat. The morning sun was just starting to burn off the fog, painting the water in shades of gold and gray. You knew my father. I trained your father 30 years ago, when he was younger than you are now. Dumbest recruit I ever saw. Also the bravest. Aldridge's voice softened. He had this thing about injustice. Couldn't let it go. Couldn't look the other way when someone was being hurt. It made him a great operator. It also got him killed. Tally's throat tightened. What really happened? The official story is that he sold classified information to. The official story is a lie. Aldridge cut her off. Your father never sold anything to anyone. He was framed. By who? Aldridge turned to look at her, his eyes holding something old and heavy. By the same system that's protecting Derek Holloway right now. By men who decided that loyalty to the institution mattered more than truth. By people who've been covering for each other so long, they've forgotten what honor means. Give me names. I'll give you better than names. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a worn folder. I'll give you proof. Tally took the folder with shaking hands. Inside were documents, photographs, witness statements, a paper trail that went back over a decade. I've been building this case since your father died, Aldridge said quietly, carefully, waiting for the right moment. Why didn't you come forward before? Because I didn't have anyone who could use it. The system protects its own, Tally. You can't fight it from the outside. You need someone inside, someone they've already underestimated, someone who knows how to wait, how to count, how to strike at exactly the right moment. He looked at her with something like pride. Someone like you. Tally stared at the documents in her hands, her father's service record, testimonies from men who'd been pressured into silence, photographs of meetings that were never supposed to be documented. And there, in the middle of it all, a name. General William Harrison. Harrison signed off on my father's court-martial, Tally said slowly. He was the presiding officer, and he knew your father was innocent. He's known for 12 years. But admitting that would mean admitting what he covered up to get his stars. Aldridge's voice hardened. Men like Harrison don't admit mistakes. They bury them. Why are you giving this to me now? Aldridge smiled, but there was no humor in it. Because last night, Derek Holloway made the biggest mistake of his life. He hit you in front of witnesses, on camera, while bragging about his connections. He gave you standing. He made you a victim. And victims get sympathy. Victims get investigations. He leaned forward. You're about to become the most scrutinized junior officer in the Navy, Lieutenant. Every reporter, every investigator, every congressman looking to score points is going to want to hear your story. And when they start digging into why a decorated ranger felt comfortable assaulting a female SEAL in a crowded bar, they're going to find something they didn't expect. They're going to find a pattern. Exactly. Aldridge's voice took on steel. Holloway isn't an isolated incident. He's a symptom. He's been protected, promoted, and praised by people who share his views. People who think women don't belong in combat. People who think harassment is hazing and assault is discipline. People like Harrison. Now you're starting to understand. Tally closed the folder. Her mind was racing, connecting dots she'd never seen before. This isn't just about Holloway. You want me to take down the entire system. I want you to do what your father couldn't, what I couldn't. Aldridge's voice cracked just slightly. I want you to prove that the quiet ones win in the end, not by fighting on their terms, but by refusing to play their game. Tally thought about the night before, the punch, the blood, the counting. She thought about her father dying in a cell for crimes he didn't commit. She thought about all the women who'd come before her, who'd been silenced and dismissed and destroyed because they dared to stand up. I'm in, she said. Aldridge nodded. I knew you would be, the moment you didn't hit back. How do we start? We already have. You filed the complaint. NCIS is opening an investigation. By noon, Holloway is going to know he's in trouble. And he's going to do what bullies always do when they're cornered. He's going to attack. And when he does, we'll be ready. Aldridge stood, his old bones creaking. Go home, get some rest. And Tally? Yeah? Keep counting. You're going to need it. By 1400 hours, Tally's phone was blowing up. Word had spread through the military grapevine faster than wildfire through dry brush. A female SEAL had been assaulted by a ranger in a bar. An NCIS investigation was underway. Someone had leaked her name. 3 reporters had already reached out for comment. A Navy public affairs officer had called to coordinate messaging. Her commanding officer had left 2 voicemails asking her to come in. And then there was the text from an unknown number. You should have stayed down. Now, I'm going to ruin you. Tally stared at the message, her split lip throbbing in time with her heartbeat. She thought about Yemen, about the moment she'd breached that door, knowing there were 6 armed terrorists on the other side, about the fear that had threatened to freeze her solid, and the training that had pushed her through it. She thought about Dante Williams bleeding out in her arms while she tried to hold his insides together. Stay with me, she'd begged. Just stay with me. You gotta count, he'd whispered, his voice already fading. Just like training, count until you know. She'd counted to 312 before his heart stopped. Tally looked at the threatening text one more time. Then she took a screenshot, forwarded it to Agent Torres, and typed a reply. I never stay down. Ask anyone who's tried to keep me there. She hit send. Then she got dressed, fixed her hair, and went to meet her commanding officer. Captain Lydia Mitchell's office smelled like coffee and authority. The woman behind the desk had 22 years of service, 3 combat deployments, and a reputation for fairness that had survived more than one attempt to destroy it. She looked at Tally's bruised face and said nothing for a long moment. Sit down, Lieutenant. Tally sat. You want to tell me why I've got 3 admirals, 2 generals, and a congressman blowing up my phone about a bar fight? It wasn't a bar fight, ma'am. It was an assault. Holloway's people are saying you started it. They're saying you threw the first punch and he defended himself. They're lying, and I can prove it. How? Video evidence. At least one member of Holloway's group recorded the entire incident. I also have documentation of my injuries, time-stamped, along with a formal statement given to NCIS this morning. Holloway has 4 witnesses who will swear you attacked him. Holloway has 3 friends who will commit perjury, and 1 kid who's going to flip the moment someone offers him immunity. Captain Mitchell's eyebrows rose. You seem very sure about that. I've seen men like Webb before, ma'am. He followed Holloway because he wanted to belong. But there's a limit to what he'll do for belonging. Lying is one thing. Going to prison is another. The captain studied her for a long moment. You planned this. You let him hit you. I recognize what he was. I knew he wouldn't be able to resist if I challenged his ego. And I knew that the only way to take down someone with his connections was to build an airtight case. Tally met her eyes. I took a punch, ma'am. That's a lot less than I've taken for this country in darker places. Mitchell was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. I'm going to tell you something that doesn't leave this room, Lieutenant. Derek Holloway has a file. Unofficial. 3 complaints from female service members over the past 5 years. All of them were pressured into withdrawing. 2 left the military. She paused. 1 tried to kill herself. Tally's hands tightened on the armrests of her chair. Why wasn't he stopped? Because he has friends in high places. Because every time someone tried to hold him accountable, someone higher up made it go away. Because the system protects men like him. Mitchell leaned forward. But you're different. You're not some junior enlisted they can intimidate. You're a SEAL. You've got combat decorations, a spotless record, and a story that's already leaked to the press. What are you saying, ma'am? I'm saying that for the first time, Holloway might have picked a fight he can't win. But only if you're willing to see it through. Only if you're ready for what they're going to throw at you. Tally thought about her father, about Yemen, about Dante dying in her arms. I'm ready. Are you? Because they're not going to fight fair. They're going to dig up everything. Your psych evals, your family history, your father's discharge. They're going to try to make you look unstable, unreliable, unfit for service. Let them dig. Tally's voice was steady. I've got nothing to hide. My father was innocent, and someday I'm going to prove that too. Mitchell's eyes widened slightly. Your father's case is closed, Lieutenant. Has been for 12 years. Cases can be reopened. New evidence can come to light. Tally stood. Is there anything else, ma'am? The captain shook her head slowly. Just be careful, Brennan. You're swimming in deep water now. There are sharks in those depths that you can't see coming. Tally smiled. And for just a moment, Captain Mitchell saw something in her eyes that made her very glad they were on the same side. I've killed sharks before, ma'am. The trick is knowing when to strike. She walked out, leaving her commanding officer staring after her with an expression somewhere between concern and hope. Over the next 3 days, Tally built her case with surgical precision. She tracked down Elena Whitmore, a former sergeant who'd filed a complaint against Holloway 3 years ago before being pressured into withdrawing it. Elena worked at a coffee shop now, living in fear, pretending those years never happened. It took Tally an hour to convince her to talk, to show her that this time would be different. There are others, Elena had whispered, at least 2 that I know of, women who filed complaints and were pressured into silence. Then came Rebecca Ashford, a former sergeant first class with an 8-year-old daughter named Sophia. Rebecca had stayed quiet because Holloway had threatened her child. Someone had left a dead cat on her doorstep. Sophia had found it coming home from school. I need you to give an official statement, Tally had said. When the investigation reaches the right point, I need you to be willing to testify. Rebecca had looked at the photograph of her daughter for a long moment. Then she'd nodded. Okay, when you need me, I'll be ready. On the 4th day, Specialist Garrett Webb called. His voice shook as he gave Tally an address. A park near the old Naval Air Station. I've got the original video, he'd said. Unedited. Everything that happened that night. But they're watching me. If they find out what I'm doing, I'll protect you, Webb. You better, because the moment I hand over that video, my life is over. That night, Tally met Webb in the empty park. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Dark circles under his eyes, hands trembling as he pressed a phone into her palm. Holloway made us edit it, he said. Cut out the parts where he threw the first punch, made it look like you attacked him. Why are you giving this to me now? Webb's jaw tightened. Because I'm not like them. I never was. I joined the Rangers because I wanted to protect people, not because I wanted to hurt them. He met her eyes. What Holloway did that night, what he made us cover up, I can't live with it anymore. The video was everything Tally needed, not just the assault, but what came after. Holloway bragging about other women he'd put in their place, names, dates, details. He confessed to everything while thinking no one would ever hold him accountable. Tally uploaded copies to 3 different cloud servers. If they wanted to bury this, they'd have to bury the entire internet. Then came the call from Captain Mitchell that changed everything. Lieutenant Brennan, we have a situation. The kind that requires your immediate presence at Naval Special Warfare Command. There's a briefing in 2 hours. Ma'am, I know what you're in the middle of, Lieutenant, and I'm telling you that this takes priority. Mitchell's voice softened slightly. Trust me, Brennan, you want to be at this briefing. The briefing room was packed with operators from a dozen different units, SEALs, SWCC crews, intelligence officers, all wearing the same expression of controlled intensity that meant something serious was happening. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Morrison stood at the front, his face grim. We have a situation in the Philippines. 6 American aid workers were kidnapped by Abu Sayyaf militants 3 days ago. They're being held in a compound in the Sulu archipelago. We've been given 72 hours to get them out before the militants start executing hostages. He pulled up a map. Initial intelligence suggested 40 hostile fighters. As of 6 hours ago, that number has been revised to 80, possibly more. We're also seeing evidence of foreign involvement. A Russian advisor has been spotted training the militants. The room went quiet. 80 fighters. They'd be going in outnumbered 10-1. We need 1 operator for solo infiltration. Disable the compound's generator and communications before the main assault begins. Morrison's eyes found Tally. Lieutenant Brennan, you're our best option for the solo role. But this is volunteer only. I won't order anyone into a suicide mission. Tally felt every eye turned toward her. The assault case, the investigation. Some probably wondered if she was stable enough for combat. Let them wonder. I volunteer, she said. The mission came down before the investigation could ground her. By the time anyone thought to pull her clearance, she was already wheels up. Morrison had made the call. 6 American lives mattered more than one pending case. The submarine insertion took 18 hours. Tally spent most of it in a meditative state, running through the mission plan. Every approach angle, every contingency, every way things could go wrong. At 0200 local time, she slipped into the Pacific. The water was warm compared to Coronado, but her wetsuit still felt like a second skin. Familiar, comforting. She swam for 45 minutes, navigating by starlight. When she reached the inlet, she paused. 2 sentries on the shoreline, both armed, both watching the water. They'd expected a water approach. Tally counted. 1, 2, 3. At 37, one sentry turned to light a cigarette. The flare ruined his night vision for precious seconds. Tally moved. She covered the distance like a ghost. The first sentry died without a sound, knife across the throat. The second caught her blade before he could raise his weapon. 2 down, 78 to go. The compound was larger than the satellite imagery suggested. Multiple buildings, lights everywhere, guards patrolling in pairs. Too many, way too many. Overwatch, this is Shadow. Hostiles significantly higher than projected. Recommend abort and reassess. Morrison's voice came back tight. Negative, Shadow. Executions begin at dawn. No time for reassessment. Proceed with mission. Copy that, Overwatch. She moved through the jungle like she was born there. Every step calculated, every breath controlled. She reached the generator building without incident. 2 guards outside, both bored. She watched them for 3 minutes, counting their pattern. At 90 seconds, they both looked away. She went in fast. The first guard dropped with a sleeper hold. The second caught her elbow before he could scream. Inside, she rigged the generator to fail in exactly 18 minutes, coinciding with the assault. 1 objective down, 1 to go. Halfway to the communications hub, she heard crying. A child, somewhere nearby, sobbing with exhausted desperation. The mission plan said nothing about children. Through a grimy window, she saw him. A boy, maybe 8 years old, huddled in a corner. Shadow, status report. You're behind schedule. She looked at the boy, at the path to the communications hub, at the countdown in her head. 17 minutes until the generator failed. Overwatch, we have a problem. There's a child hostage, 8 years old. Not in the original intelligence. Silence. Then Morrison's strained voice. Can you extract him? Affirmative, but it will compromise my approach to the secondary objective. Shadow, the mission depends on disabling those communications. I know what the mission depends on, Commander. I'm telling you, I can do both. But I need you to trust me. A long pause. You've got 12 minutes, Shadow. Don't make me regret this. The boy's cell had 2 guards. She took them both down in 3 seconds. Opened the door and knelt beside the terrified child. Dylan? Is your name Dylan? The boy nodded, eyes huge with tears. My name is Tally. I'm an American soldier. I'm here to take you home. But I need you to be very brave and very quiet. Can you do that for me? Dylan wrapped thin arms around her neck. He weighed almost nothing. Dehydrated. Hadn't eaten properly in days. Tally stood, adjusting to the weight, and headed for the communications hub. 9 minutes. 8. 7. The communications building loomed ahead, guarded by 4 fighters and something that made her blood run cold. The Russian. Alexei Volkov. 6'4", built like a tank, scar down his left cheek. A man who'd killed more people than he could count. He saw her emerge from the shadows, Dylan on her back. American, he said in accented English. I wondered when you would come. Tally set Dylan behind a concrete barrier. Stay here. Don't move. Don't make a sound. She turned back to Volkov. You can walk away from this. Volkov laughed. My fight is with anyone who pays me. Tonight, that means you. He gestured to his guards. Kill her. They rushed her at once. Tally was faster, more precise, more ruthless. Palm strike to the first one's nose, driving bone into brain. Knife to the second one's throat. Rifle grabbed, 2 rounds through the third and fourth. Then it was just her and Volkov. He moved like lightning. His first punch nearly took her head off. She dodged by millimeters. His second connected with her ribs, cracking at least 2. Tally gasped, rolled, came up fighting. You're good, Volkov admitted, but you're small and tired and alone. I've been underestimated before, she attacked. Feint high, sweep low. Volkov read it perfectly, caught her in a bear hug that lifted her off the ground. She couldn't breathe. Her ribs screamed. He was crushing her. Tally drove her forehead into his nose with everything she had. Cartilage crunched. Blood sprayed. His grip loosened. She slammed her palm into his ear, rupturing the eardrum. He roared and dropped her. She rolled, came up with her knife. Volkov charged, blinded by blood and fury. Tally waited, counted. 1, 2, 3. At 4, she stepped aside, let his momentum carry him past. Her knife found the back of his knee, severing the tendon. He went down hard. She was on him before he could recover, blade at his throat. I should kill you. Volkov laughed, blood bubbling. Then do it. Tally thought about it. Really thought about it. Then she reversed her grip and slammed the knife hilt into his temple. He went limp. You're worth more alive. The intelligence you have will save more lives than your death. She zip-tied his hands and turned to Dylan. You're okay. You did so good. We're almost done. 3 minutes until the generator failed. Tally kicked open the communications hub door and went to work. 30 seconds to locate the transmitter. 20 to plant the charge. 10 to get out. She ran, Dylan clinging to her back as the compound erupted behind them. Generator died first, plunging everything into darkness. Then the assault began. Explosions, gunfire, coordinated violence. Tally made it to extraction with 40 seconds to spare. A helicopter touched down, rotors whipping the jungle. She handed Dylan to a medic and collapsed against the fuselage, broken ribs screaming. Shadow, this is Overwatch. Status report. Mission complete, Commander. All objectives achieved. Child hostage recovered. Russian advisor incapacitated and ready for extraction. Outstanding work, Lieutenant. Outstanding. She started counting again, just to stay conscious. 1, 2, 3. At 107, they lifted off. At 234, morphine entered her system. At 312, the same number she'd counted when Dante died, she finally let herself sleep. When she woke, she was on a hospital ship. Tubes in her arms, bandages around her chest. Colonel Victor Aldridge stood beside her bed, looking like he'd aged 10 years. We have a problem, he said. Tally's heart sank. What happened? While you were gone, Holloway filed a counter-complaint. He's claiming you assaulted him. 3 witnesses backing his story. Aldridge's jaw tightened. And someone leaked your psychiatric evaluation to the press. They're saying you're unstable, that you have PTSD, that you can't be trusted. The video. Webb's video. Webb is missing. His apartment was ransacked 2 days ago. No one's seen him since. Tally closed her eyes. They'd gotten to him. While she was saving lives in the Philippines, they'd found Webb and made him disappear. What about Elena? Rebecca? Elena's in protective custody. Rebecca's scared, but holding. They're scared. That's why they're escalating. That video is out there somewhere, and they know it. They're trying to destroy your credibility before it surfaces. Then we need to find Webb. You need to recover. 2 broken ribs and a concussion. I've operated with worse. I know, but this isn't the Philippines. This is a different kind of war. Aldridge's voice softened. Let me handle it. You focus on healing. 48 hours. Find him in 48 hours or I'm doing it myself. 47 hours and 32 minutes later, Tally's phone rang. We found him. She sat up so fast her ribs screamed. Where? Motel outside Fredericksburg. Someone beat him pretty bad, but he's alive. And Tally? Aldridge's voice carried hope. He still has the phone. Hid a copy before they grabbed him. Uploaded it to his sister's cloud account. Get him somewhere safe. Already done. He's with Elena and Rebecca at a secure location. A pause. The hearing is in 3 days. NCIS fast-tracked it after your mission made national news. You're a hero now, Tally. They can't bury this quietly anymore. They'll try. Let 'em. We've got witnesses, we've got video, we've got a pattern of abuse going back years. Aldridge's voice hardened. And we've got you. Tally discharged herself against medical advice and drove straight to the safe house. Webb looked worse than expected. Black eyes, split lip, bruises everywhere. Professional efficiency. Enough pain to send a message, not quite enough to kill. Lieutenant, he said, voice damaged. I'm sorry. I tried to fight back, but there were 4 of them. You survived. You kept the evidence safe. That's all that matters. They said they'd kill my family. My mom, my sister, I almost gave them everything. But you didn't. No, because I kept thinking about what you said, about some things mattering more than career, more than safety. He swallowed hard. My mom would rather die than have a son who helped cover up what Holloway did. Tally gripped his shoulder. When this is over, I'm going to make sure you're taken care of. New assignment, clean record, whatever you need. When this is over, I just want to be able to look at myself in the mirror. That's enough. The next 3 days were preparation, legal briefings, witness coordination, evidence review. Tally went over her statement until she could recite it in her sleep. The night before the hearing, she sat alone on the safe house porch, staring at stars. Aldridge found her just before midnight. Can't sleep? Never can, not before something big. He lowered himself into the chair beside her, old joints creaking. Your father was the same way. Night before a mission, he'd be up all night, planning, preparing, running scenarios. Did it help? It kept him alive for 20 years. They're going to come at you hard tomorrow. Holloway's lawyers will try to destroy your credibility. They'll bring up Yemen, your psych eval, your father's discharge, everything to make you look unstable. I know. And you're ready? Tally turned to look at him. Colonel, I've been ready for this my whole life. Every time someone told me I didn't belong, every time someone said women couldn't handle combat, every time someone looked at my father's name and assumed I was tainted. I've been preparing for this moment. This isn't combat. You can't fight your way out of a courtroom. No, but I can tell the truth. And sometimes the truth is the most powerful weapon there is. Aldridge smiled slightly. Your father said something like that once, right before they court-martialed him. And he was right. The truth was on his side. The system just wasn't ready to hear it. You think it's ready now? Tally looked back at the stars. I think I'm going to make it ready. The hearing convened at 0900 in a conference room at Naval Station Norfolk. Tally wore her dress uniform, medals gleaming, hair in a regulation bun. The bruise on her jaw had faded to yellow, but it was still visible. She wanted it visible. The panel consisted of 5 senior officers, 2 admirals, 2 captains, 1 JAG colonel overseeing proceedings. Admiral Patricia Whitfield, a known advocate for women in combat. The others, harder to read. Holloway sat across from her in dress uniform, confident, relaxed, like a man who'd already won. His civilian lawyer, Marcus Crane, whispered in his ear. Holloway smiled. That smile made Tally want to break his jaw. She started counting instead. 1, 2, 3. The JAG colonel called the hearing to order. This proceeding is convened to investigate allegations of assault made by Lieutenant Thalia Brennan against Staff Sergeant Derek Holloway, as well as counter-allegations made by Staff Sergeant Holloway against Lieutenant Brennan. Crane stood first. Admiral, members of the panel. We intend to demonstrate that Lieutenant Brennan initiated this confrontation, that she made threatening statements, that Staff Sergeant Holloway acted in self-defense. He paused for effect. Furthermore, we will present evidence of Lieutenant Brennan's psychological instability, including documented PTSD. We will argue her perception was compromised and that her allegations are nothing more than a calculated attempt to advance her career at the expense of a decorated war hero. Tally kept her face neutral, counted to 27. Her lawyer, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Brenner, rose. The defense's characterization is not only inaccurate but offensive. Lieutenant Brennan is a decorated Navy SEAL with an exemplary record, including a mission last week in which she single-handedly rescued a child hostage while completing her objectives under fire. Brenner's voice took on steel. We will present video evidence showing Staff Sergeant Holloway initiated the confrontation without provocation. We will also present testimony establishing a pattern of predatory behavior spanning 5 years and involving at least 3 other victims. The panel members exchanged glances, bigger than expected. Holloway's witnesses testified first, Jensen and Briggs. Both swore Tally threw the first punch. Their stories polished, rehearsed, almost identical, too identical. Brenner caught it during cross-examination. Specialist Jensen, describe exactly what Lieutenant Brennan said before she allegedly attacked. Jensen recited perfectly. She said, "You want to see what a real SEAL can do?" Then she swung at him. Brenner nodded, turned to Briggs. Sergeant Briggs, what did Lieutenant Brennan say? She said, "You want to see what a real SEAL can do." Then she attacked. Brenner let silence stretch. Interesting. Word for word identical. Almost as if you rehearsed it. Crane objected. Sustained, but damage done. The panel saw the coordination. Then Tally took the stand. She walked with steady steps, bearing perfect despite her ribs, raised her right hand, swore to tell the truth. Brenner led her through that night. Tally described everything precisely. Comments, escalation, thrown book, punch, voice level, factual. No ammunition for claims of emotion. Lieutenant Brennan, why didn't you defend yourself? Tally paused. Because I knew that fighting back would give him what he wanted, a way to claim self-defense. I knew the only way to hold him accountable was to build an airtight case, so I took the hit, documented my injuries, and trusted the system. That's remarkable restraint. It's training, ma'am, strategic thinking, putting mission success above personal satisfaction. That night, my mission was justice. Justice required patience. Crane attacked on cross. You suffer from PTSD, don't you? I experienced trauma-related symptoms following Yemen, where my teammate was killed. I sought treatment and was cleared for duty. But you're still in treatment? I attend counseling voluntarily. That's not instability, it's strength. It means I'm willing to do the work to stay healthy. Isn't it possible your PTSD caused you to misperceive the threat? Tally looked at the panel. I spent 2 hours in that bar before Staff Sergeant Holloway arrived, reading a book, not looking for trouble, not feeling threatened, just trying to honor the memory of a friend who died in my arms. Her voice cracked on the last words. Not rehearsed, real. Staff Sergeant Holloway walked to my table, made sexually degrading comments, threw my book across the room, then punched me when I asked him to pick it up. There's nothing to misperceive. Crane tried a different angle. Isn't it true your father, Master Chief Connor Brennan, was dishonorably discharged for... Brenner objected. Relevance? Goes to character. The apple doesn't fall far. The colonel considered. I'll allow it, but tread carefully. Tally felt the room shift. The moment they'd use her father against her, ready her whole life. My father was convicted on fabricated evidence and coerced testimony. He maintained innocence until he died in prison. Tally's voice stayed steady. I have documentation proving his conviction resulted from conspiracy involving senior officers who wanted to silence him. One is now a general, another is currently advising Staff Sergeant Holloway's defense. Dead silence. Crane paled. I object. I have the documentation here. Tally pulled the folder from her uniform. Witness statements, financial records, communications proving my father was framed because he tried to report misconduct during Desert Storm. The same misconduct that led to 12 American servicemen's deaths. The colonel leaned forward. Lieutenant Brennan, are you making a formal accusation? Yes, sir. I'm accusing General William Harrison of conspiracy to obstruct justice in my father's case, and ongoing efforts to protect predators like Staff Sergeant Holloway. Tally met his eyes. I'm also prepared to name the other officers involved if the panel wishes. Chaos. Crane demanded recess. Panel members conferred urgently. Tally sat perfectly still, counting. 1, 12, 13. The colonel banged his gavel. 30-minute recess. Lieutenant Brennan, make that documentation available immediately. Tally handed over the folder. Aldridge's life work. 12 years of evidence, finally seeing light. When they resumed, the atmosphere had changed. Panel members looked at Tally differently, not with suspicion, with respect. Brenner called her next witness. The defense call specialist Garrett Webb. Webb walked in terrified but determined, face still bruised, still swollen, evidence of what they'd done. He told the truth, all of it. Holloway's comments, the escalation, the punch, being ordered to edit the video, the threats, the 4 men who'd beaten him. And did you give them what they wanted? No, ma'am. Because some things matter more than safety. Then Brenner played the video, the original unedited footage. The room watched in silence, Holloway throwing the book, grabbing her hair, punching her while she stood motionless. They heard him bragging after, naming other women he'd put in their place. When it ended, Admiral Whitfield had tears in her eyes. Crane tried to object, claim manipulation. But technical experts were ready. Authentic, unaltered, time-stamped, geolocated, irrefutable. Elena Whitmore came next, walking like to her execution, terrified, trembling, moving forward anyway. She told her story. Harassment, assault, threats against family, pressure to withdraw. Why come forward now? Elena looked at Tally. Because she showed me that staying silent doesn't mean staying safe. It just means staying scared. I've been scared for 3 years. I don't want to be scared anymore. Rebecca Ashford followed. Then 2 other women who'd come forward on their own. 4 victims, 4 stories, 4 lives destroyed by the same predator, one thread connecting them. Every time someone tried accountability, someone higher made it go away. Someone like General William Harrison. By the time testimonies ended, Holloway's smile was gone. He sat rigid, knuckles white, as evidence crushed his defense. Crane made one final attempt. These women are motivated by resentment, jealous of my client's success, using Lieutenant Brennan's case for their own vendettas. Admiral Whitfield spoke for the first time. Counselor, I've heard enough. 4 women with identical stories, separated by years and geography. None knew each other before. Video evidence of assault. Testimony from a witness beaten for refusing to lie. She turned to the panel. I move for immediate deliberation. The others nodded. We'll reconvene in 1 hour. 53 minutes later, they returned. The colonel's face grim. This panel has reviewed all evidence. We find allegations against Lieutenant Brennan to be without merit. Her actions were consistent with building a legal case, not aggression. He turned to Holloway. Staff Sergeant Derek Holloway. This panel finds you guilty of assault, conduct unbecoming, and multiple counts of sexual harassment spanning 5 years. Holloway stood, face purple with rage. I'm a war hero. 12 years of service. You are hereby stripped of rank and will be court-martialed under UCMJ. Dishonorably discharged from the United States Army. Furthermore, this panel recommends full investigation into General Harrison's role in protecting you and covering up prior complaints. The colonel's voice was ice. Dismissed. This isn't over. Holloway lunged toward Tally, but MPs caught him. You hear me, Brennan? This isn't over. Tally stood slowly, ribs aching, heart pounding with something like victory. Yes, she said quietly. It is. They dragged him out. His screams echoed until a door slammed. Tally stood in silence, surrounded by women who'd found courage because she'd found hers. Elena crying. Rebecca's arm around her. Webb looking like he'd set down a weight he'd carried for years. Brenner approached with a smile. That was incredible. You just took down a decorated ranger and implicated a 3-star general. It's not enough. What do you mean? Tally looked at the folder on the evidence table. Holloway was a symptom. Harrison is the disease. I'm not done until the people who destroyed my father face justice too. That's gonna take years, maybe decades. Tally picked up the folder. I've got time. And evidence. And now something I didn't have before. What's that? Witnesses who aren't afraid anymore. She walked out into a hallway full of reporters. Cameras flashed, questions flew. Tally stopped. Thought about all the women silenced over the years. All the careers destroyed. All the lives damaged by predators who thought they were untouchable. She turned to face the cameras. My message is simple. The quiet ones win in the end. Not by fighting on their terms, but by refusing to play their game. By documenting everything. By building cases so strong they can't be ignored. By finding courage to speak, even when it's terrifying. She paused. And most importantly, by knowing you're not alone. There are others who've been through what you've been through. Find them, support them, stand together. Her voice strengthened. Because the only thing predators fear more than exposure is solidarity. When we stand together, they can't silence us. They can't intimidate us. They can't win. She walked through the crowd without another word. Outside, Aldridge was waiting. Hell of a speech. It needed to be said. Harrison's gonna come after you now. Let him. I've already won the battle that mattered. Everything else is just cleanup. Cleanup that could get you killed. Then I'll die knowing I told the truth. That's more than my father got. That's more than most people ever get. Aldridge studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Your father would be proud. I know. Now let's go finish what he started. 6 months passed like water through open fingers. Tally spent 3 of those months in South Korea, running the most dangerous undercover operation of her career. She'd infiltrated a terror cell planning to assassinate a visiting American delegation, a delegation that included General William Harrison himself. The irony wasn't lost on her. She could have let it happen, could have looked the other way while the man who destroyed her father walked into an ambush. No one would ever know she'd had the power to stop it. She counted to 200 before making her decision. Some lines you don't cross, not even for revenge. The operation went sideways on the 3rd week. Someone recognized her as American. They grabbed her outside a coffee shop in Itaewon, threw a bag over her head, drove her to a warehouse on Seoul's outskirts. The interrogation lasted 4 days. They beat her, waterboarded her, broke 2 of her fingers trying to get her to reveal the American response plan. Tally gave them nothing. On the 4th night, she counted to 473. Then she made her move. The guard who brought food made a mistake, got too close. Tally's hands were bound, her legs weren't. She wrapped her thighs around his neck and squeezed until he stopped moving, used his keys to free herself, his radio to call for extraction, his gun to fight her way to the communications room. The intel she transmitted saved the entire delegation. 14 American generals, 37 support staff, 1 man who destroyed her family and never lost sleep over it, General William Harrison. The strike team found her 40 minutes later, barely conscious, surrounded by bodies of 6 terrorists she'd killed with bare hands and a stolen pistol. Jesus Christ, the team leader stared at the carnage. Brennan, what the hell happened here? Tally looked up through swollen eyes. I counted. They medevaced her to a military hospital in Japan. The doctor said she was lucky to be alive. 3 cracked ribs, punctured lung, severe dehydration, injuries that would take months to heal. Tally called it Tuesday. She was still hospitalized when Aldridge arrived, looking older than ever. You saved Harrison's life. I saved 14 lives. His just happened to be one of them. After everything he did to your father, after everything he's done to protect predators like Holloway, most people would have let him die. I'm not most people. And revenge isn't justice. My father taught me that. Your father also died in a prison cell for crimes he didn't commit, which is why I'm going to exonerate him the right way, through the system, with evidence and witnesses and truth. Tally met his eyes. If I'd let Harrison die, I'd be no better than him. I'd be using the same tactics, eliminating enemies instead of holding them accountable. Some would call that noble. Some would call it stupid. Tally almost smiled. I call it necessary. Because the whole point of this fight is proving the system can work, that justice is possible. If I start making exceptions, if I start deciding who deserves to live and who deserves to die, then I've already lost. Aldridge was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder. While you were getting yourself nearly killed, I wasn't idle. He handed it to her. Harrison's been under investigation for 3 months. The evidence you provided, combined with testimony from 6 additional witnesses, was enough to open a formal inquiry. Tally opened the folder, her hands shaking. Inside were documents she'd been waiting 12 years to see. Charges filed against General William Harrison. Conspiracy to obstruct justice. Conduct unbecoming. Abuse of authority. And at the bottom, a single sheet that made her heart stop. A recommendation for the posthumous exoneration of Master Chief Connor Brennan. They're going to clear his name, she whispered. They already have. The Secretary of the Navy signed the order yesterday. Aldridge's voice was thick. Your father will be restored to full rank with all honors, his discharge expunged, and his family will receive full death benefits plus back pay for the years he spent wrongfully imprisoned. Tally stared at the paper. Words blurred as tears filled her eyes. 12 years. 12 years of carrying her father's shame. 12 years of proving herself twice as hard because his name was supposed to be tainted. And now it was over. Does my mother know? I called her this morning. She cried for 20 minutes straight. Then she asked when you were coming home so she could make you mole. Said you probably haven't been eating right. Tally laughed, then winced as her ribs protested. She's not wrong. She also said your father would be proud, that he always knew you'd be the one to set things right. The tears came then. Tally didn't try to stop them. She cried for her father, dead in a cell maintaining innocence until his last breath. She cried for her mother, who'd spent 12 years being a traitor's widow. She cried for herself, for the girl who'd grown up in a lie's shadow and emerged into truth's light. And somewhere in those tears, she felt something she hadn't felt since before Yemen. Peace. Recovery took 3 months. Tally spent most of it at her mother's house in San Diego, eating mole and tamales and pozole, letting herself be fussed over like she was 8 again. Her mother, Sarah Brennan, had aged since the discharge. Gray in her hair, lines around her eyes, but there was a lightness now that hadn't been there before. Your father always said the truth would come out, Sarah told her daughter one evening as they watched the sunset. I stopped believing him after the first year, then the second. By the time he died, I'd given up hope entirely. I never gave up. I know, mija. That's why you succeeded where we failed. Sarah took her daughter's hand. He used to talk about you constantly in his letters, how proud he was, how much you reminded him of himself. He said you had his stubbornness, but your grandmother's wisdom. Abuela was the wisest person I ever knew. She was also the most patient. She used to say that justice is like a river. It finds its own path eventually, even if it takes years to wear through the rock. Sarah squeezed her hand. You're like that river, Tally. You don't fight obstacles. You go around them. You wear them down. And eventually, you reach the sea. Tally thought about all the obstacles she'd faced. Holloway, Harrison, the system itself. I'm not done yet, Mama. Harrison is going to trial, but there are others, other predators who've been protected, other victims who've been silenced. I know, and you'll fight them too. Sarah smiled, but not tonight. Tonight, you rest. You've earned it. Tally leaned her head on her mother's shoulder, watching the sun sink into the Pacific. For the first time in years, she let herself just breathe. General William Harrison's trial lasted 3 weeks. Tally testified on day 4. She walked into that courtroom in dress uniform, medals gleaming, and told the truth about everything. Her father's case, the cover-up, the years of protection for predators like Holloway. Harrison sat stone-faced through her entire testimony, but when she finished, when she looked directly at him and said, "My father died believing that someday the truth would come out. Today, that day has finally come." She saw something crack behind his eyes. Fear. He was finally afraid. The verdict came down 2 days later. Guilty on all counts. Harrison was stripped of his rank, his pension, his legacy. Everything he'd spent 40 years building, destroyed in a single afternoon. As they let him out, he passed Tally's row. He stopped, MPs gripping his arms, and looked at her with hatred burning. "This isn't justice," he hissed. "This is revenge." Tally stood slowly, meeting his gaze without flinching. "No, General. Revenge would have been letting you die in soul. This is accountability. This is the system finally working the way it's supposed to." She paused. "My father never got to see this day, but I'm seeing it for him." Harrison's face contorted with rage. My father was a hero, and now everyone knows it." Tally turned away. "Goodbye, General. I hope you find peace in whatever cell they put you in. It's more than you deserve." They dragged him out. His protests echoed off marble walls. Tally walked outside into sunlight, surrounded by reporters and cameras and chaos. But she wasn't looking at any of that. She was looking at the woman waiting at the bottom of the courthouse steps. Lieutenant Commander Brennan, the young woman snapped to attention. Casey Torres, 23, fresh out of BUD/S, newest female Navy SEAL. "At ease, and call me Tally." She studied the young woman, strong, confident, fire in her eyes that couldn't be taught. "Thank me for what?" "For showing me it was possible. I watched your testimony at the first hearing. I watched you stand up to Holloway, to Harrison, to everyone who said women didn't belong." Casey's voice wavered. "I was ready to quit BUD/S 3 times. Every time I wanted to give up, I thought about you, about what you'd been through, about how you kept going. Tally felt something warm spread through her chest. You made it through BUD/S on your own. I didn't do any of that for you. You did more than you know. Casey pulled something from her pocket, a worn piece of paper. This is the speech you gave after the first verdict, the one about quiet ones winning in the end. I've read it every day for 6 months. Tally looked at the paper, creased, faded, clearly handled hundreds of times. Keep it. And when you find someone who needs to hear those words, pass it on. Yes, ma'am. Will I see you at the command? I heard you're taking over the training program. That's the rumor. Think you can handle having me as an instructor? I think I'd be honored. Then I'll see you Monday. 0600, don't be late. Casey grinned, saluted, and disappeared into the crowd. Tally watched her go, feeling something shift inside her. For so long she'd been fighting alone, carrying the weight of her father's legacy, her own trauma, the system that was supposed to protect her. But she wasn't alone anymore. There were others now. Women who'd found courage because she'd found hers. Men like Webb who'd chosen integrity over convenience. A whole generation coming up behind her, ready to be better than the ones who came before. Aldridge appeared at her elbow. Hell of a day, hell of a year. What's next? Tally thought about it, about the training program waiting, about young women like Casey who needed someone to show them the way, about all the fights still to come and all the victories still to win. What's next is we go to work. We take everything we've learned and we use it to build something better. We train the next generation to be stronger than we were, smarter than we were, more resilient than we were. That's a lot of work. I've never been afraid of work. Tally started walking toward her car. Coming? Aldridge fell into step beside her. Wouldn't miss it. 1 year later, Tally stood at the edge of the pool at Naval Special Warfare Command, watching a new class of candidates struggle through drown-proofing. Among them was a young woman named Jessica Park, 24, fighting through the water like her life depended on it. Because it did. Tally watched Jessica's form, technique, determination. She saw the moment when exhaustion hit, when the body started screaming to give up. She also saw the moment when Jessica pushed through it. Torres. Tally nodded to Casey. Take over. She walked to the pool's edge as Jessica surfaced, gasping. Park. A word. Jessica hauled herself out, still breathing hard. Ma'am, how many times did you want to quit in the last 10 minutes? The young woman's jaw tightened. 17, ma'am. And how many times did you quit? 0, ma'am. That's the only number that matters. Tally studied her for a moment. You remind me of someone. Who, ma'am? Me, about 10 years ago. Tally's voice softened. You're going to make it, Park. I can see it in you. But you need to stop fighting the water. Ma'am? You're treating it like an enemy. It's not. It's a partner. You work with it, not against it. Same goes for everything else you're going to face in this program. She paused. And in your career. Jessica's eyes widened slightly. How did you know I was struggling? Because I struggled the same way. Every good operator does. Tally put a hand on her shoulder. The ones who make it aren't the ones who don't struggle. They're the ones who keep going despite the struggle. Remember that. Yes, ma'am. Now get back in the water. You've got 40 minutes of hell left. Jessica dove back in without hesitation. Tally watched her go, then turned to find Aldridge watching from the observation deck. She climbed up to join him. You're good at this, he said. Teaching, inspiring. He gestured toward the pool. 5 women in this class. A year ago, there was 1. 5 years ago, there were 0. It's not because of me. It's partly because of you. And partly because of the ones you've already trained. And partly because of the culture you're helping to change. Aldridge smiled. Legacy isn't just about what you accomplish, Tally. It's about what you make possible for others. Tally thought about her father, about the legacy he'd tried to build, the one stolen from him for 12 years. My father used to say that the measure of a person isn't what they achieve, but what they leave behind. Your father was a wise man. He was also stubborn, and impatient, and terrible at fishing. Tally laughed softly. But he was right about that. She looked down at the pool, at the young women and men fighting through the hardest training program in the world. The individual victories don't matter as much as what they add up to. And what do yours add up to? Tally watched Jessica break the surface, still fighting, still refusing to quit. Hope, she said quietly. They add up to hope. That evening, Tally returned to the rusty compass for the first time in over a year. Mac was behind the bar, same as always. He looked up when she walked in, and his weathered face broke into a grin. We'll all be damned. The legend returns. Just Tally, Mac. Not according to that. He pointed to something on the wall behind the bar. Tally turned and felt her breath catch. It was a photograph. Her in Seoul, covered in dust and blood, being carried out by the rescue team. Underneath it, a small brass plaque. Lieutenant Commander Thalia Brennan, United States Navy SEAL. She didn't need to prove she belonged. She proved no one else could do what she does. Where did you get that? One of your teammates brought it in last month. Said people need to see what real strength looks like. Mac said a ginger ale in front of her without being asked. I figured it belonged here, right where it all started. Tally stared at the photograph, at the woman in it, battered, broken, but still fighting. I didn't do it alone, Mac. Nobody ever does. He leaned on the bar. But someone has to go first. Someone has to kick down the door and show everyone else it's possible. He paused. That was you. Tally sat in her old booth, the same one where Holloway had confronted her almost 2 years ago. So much had changed since then. Holloway was in federal prison, serving 15 years. Harrison was in a different prison, serving 20. Webb had rebuilt his career, now a sergeant himself, training new Rangers with emphasis on integrity. Elena had gone back to school, studying to become a counselor for trauma survivors. Rebecca's daughter, Sophia, was thriving, no longer living in fear. The other women who'd testified had found their own paths forward, their voices finally heard after years of silence. And her father, Connor Brennan, had been posthumously promoted to Command Master Chief, his name cleared, his honor restored. His portrait now hung in the Naval Special Warfare Command headquarters, next to the other heroes who'd given everything for their country. The door opened behind her. Tally turned to see Casey Torres walk in, followed by Jessica Park and 3 other young women from the training program. Ma'am? Casey approached. The team wanted to buy you a drink, if that's okay. Tally looked at them. 5 young warriors, strong and capable and unafraid. The future. Sit down and call me Tally. They crowded into the booth around her, ordering drinks, talking over each other with the easy camaraderie of people who'd suffered together. Can I ask you something? Jessica said during a lull. Anything. That night when Holloway hit you, what were you thinking? Tally considered the question, one she'd been asked 100 times by reporters, investigators, other service members. She'd never given a completely honest answer. But these women deserved the truth. I was scared, she admitted. Terrified, actually. Not of him, of what I might do to him. I knew if I fought back, I'd destroy him. And then I'd be the one going to prison. And he'd be the victim. She paused. So I counted. My father taught me that when I was a little girl. Whenever you're overwhelmed, count. Count until the world makes sense again. Count until you know what to do next. How high did you count that night? 8. Just 8. Tally's smile faded. I've counted a lot higher since then. 312 when my teammate died. 473 when I was tortured in Seoul. 1017 when I testified against Harrison. I was nervous, she shrugged. But the point isn't the number. The point is that counting gives you control. It gives you time to think when everyone expects you to react. And in that time, you can choose who you want to be. Who did you choose to be? Someone my father would be proud of. Tally looked around the table. Someone who fights smart, not just hard. Someone who knows that the quiet ones win in the end, not by destroying their enemies, but by outlasting them. The table was silent for a moment. Then Casey raised her glass. To the quiet ones. The others echoed her. To the quiet ones. They drank together, laughing and talking until the bar closed. Matt caught her eye as she left, nodded once. A gesture of respect from one warrior to another. She nodded back. Outside, the stars burned overhead, same as they'd burned on the night Holloway had hit her. Same as they'd burned when her father was alive, teaching her to fish and count and believe in justice even when the world said it was impossible. Casey fell in step beside her. Ma'am, Tally, one more question. Go ahead. Was it worth it? Everything you went through, the pain, the fear, the years of fighting. Was it worth it? Tally stopped walking. She looked at the young woman beside her, strong, confident, ready to face whatever challenges came next. She thought about her father, finally at peace. She thought about Elena and Rebecca, finally free. She thought about Webb, finally proud of who he was. She thought about all the women who would come after, who would walk through doors she'd kicked open, who would stand on shoulders she'd made strong. Every second, she said. Every single second. Casey smiled. Good, because I plan to make it worth even more. I know you will. Tally started walking again. Now go get some rest. 0600 comes early. Yes, ma'am. The young women dispersed into the night, heading back to their quarters, back to their dreams of tridents and glory and service. Callie stood alone in the parking lot, breathing in the salt air. Colonel Aldridge's voice came from behind her. You're going to be late for your meeting tomorrow. I know. The Joint Chiefs don't like to be kept waiting. They'll wait for this. Aldridge came to stand beside her. What are you thinking about? Tally looked up at the stars. My father used to say that the people who survive aren't the toughest or the strongest. They're the quietest, the ones who can take pain without making a sound. He was right. I know, Tally smiled. But he left out the most important part. What's that? The quiet ones aren't quiet because they can't fight. They're quiet because they don't need to prove anything to anyone. She turned to face him. I spent years trying to prove I belonged, trying to earn my place, trying to make up for my father's supposed disgrace. And now I know the truth. I never had to prove anything. I just had to be patient, to wait for the right moment, to count until I knew. Tally's voice strengthened. The system didn't fail my father because he was weak. It failed him because the people running it were corrupt. And now those people are gone, and the system is getting better. And a whole generation of young women is coming up who'll never have to fight the battles I fought. That sounds like victory. It sounds like progress. Tally started walking toward her car. Victory is what happens when those young women have daughters, and their daughters never have to wonder if they belong. Victory is what happens when Holloway and Harrison are forgotten, and my father's name is remembered. Victory is what happens when the quiet ones don't have to stay quiet anymore, because the world has finally learned to listen. Aldridge watched her go, pride evident in his eyes. Your father would be proud, Tally. She stopped. Turned back one last time, I know, and so am I. Talia Brennan drove away into the night, toward tomorrow and all the tomorrows after that. She didn't know what challenges waited ahead. More missions, more training, more fights against a system that was still learning to be better. But whatever came, she'd face it the same way she'd faced everything else. With patience, with precision, with the quiet certainty that real power doesn't announce itself, it just endures. And somewhere in a federal prison in Kansas, Derek Holloway sat in his cell, counting the days until a release that seemed impossibly far away. He'd finally learned what Tolly Brennan had known all along. The quiet ones aren't quiet because they can't fight. They're quiet because they don't need to.